The student had a real axe to grind with the university, or felt like he did. And so, he came up with this whole plan of how he was going to be an active shooter, and he was going to inflict this on the university. And he had a whiteboard in his dorm room, and he wrote out what his plan was going to be, and he created improvised explosive devices in his dorm room. He ordered a high power rifle with an extended magazine with a lot of rounds in it. He decided that he was going to pull the fire alarm when everybody ran out of their dorms. He was going to attack them.
Welcome to the Security Connection podcast. We connect you to leading security professionals and technology experts through in-depth conversations. You can also expect to hear valuable security insights and some great stories. My name is Joe Souza. I'm an Air Force veteran and a career security professional. I've worked for defense contractors, private companies in manufacturing and retail, as well as higher education, which is what we're going to talk about today. Today, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Serverly. Serverly is a security solutions provider, and we help organizations plan and deploy advanced security solutions. I'm joined today by Sean Sandel, who's our producer for this episode, as well as Director of Sales and Marketing for Serverly. Today's guest is Joe Thalheimer. He is the Director of Emergency Management and also an alum of the University of Central Florida, also known as UCF. Joe's one of the founding members of the emergency management team. It's funny, I'm from the Northeast, and I hadn't heard of UCF until my oldest of three daughters was visiting campuses across the country, trying to decide on where she wanted to go to college. So we visited several of the Florida state schools, and we learned that UCF was far too big for her. One thing I didn't know at the time is it's quite a young university at only 60 years old, and it's also one of the largest based on population, always in the top 5, and at times it's been number 1 for the largest population. So Joe, welcome to the Security Connection podcast. Can you please tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Well, I've been in the security and emergency management business basically my whole adult life. I started out as a security guard at a museum that was helping me work my way through college. And so I did that on nights and weekends and took classes during the day. And then after I graduated, I went to UCF, as you mentioned. I started at the convention center here in Orlando, which is the second largest convention center in the United States. It's actually 7.7 million square feet. And I started there as a security guard, walking a beat. And then I gradually worked my way up the ranks there until I became what they call the assistant security supervisor. And then my responsibilities were for personnel. We had 60 full-time personnel and about 100 part-time staff. So I went over there and I was part of their startup team. That was their founding team when we were the first new med school in about 40 years. I was there for 2 years. After the med school received its initial accreditation, I started looking for my next opportunity. At that time, the Department of Emergency Management on the main campus was expanding out its operation, and they were looking for someone to do warning and communications. So basically mass notification systems and some of the communications, technological communications, emergency blue light phones, radios, things like that. I shifted over here. I did that job from 2014 to 2019 when I became the director. I've been a director of emergency management here ever since.
So Joe, many people may have heard about an emergency operations center, right? If they have inclement weather in their area, the governor always goes to the EOC, and that's probably all people knew about emergency management as a career field, and probably didn't even know emergency manager was an actual job until really the pandemic hit. So I guess there's a lot of exposure. You became very forward-facing, you and everybody in your career field. So can you briefly describe what an emergency manager does and how you got into it a little bit more detail?
Sure. So an emergency manager essentially plans for any emergencies that can befall your institution or municipality, your corporation, and starts writing plans. So how we do that here at UCF and how a lot of folks do that is through a THIRA plan, which is your threat hazard identification risk assessment. And so basically you look at what your vulnerabilities are, the probabilities of that vulnerability happening, and then what the potential impact is. And then you assign it a numeric score. So the highest numeric score would be for the most probable or the most impact. So we do it on a scale of 1, 2, and 3, make it pretty simple. Low impact, we give it a 1. It's a medium, 2, and if it's higher, 3. And then what you do is you multiply those scores for each of the things that you're forecasting out. So maybe it's a hurricane, a structure fire, a wildfire, a cyber attack. And then you multiply those numbers together, and that is your total score for that hazard. And those are the ones that you typically plan for. So here at UCF, cyber is a big challenge for us. And active assailant is another, or an active threat is another thing. But, the pandemic, going back to pandemic, that's always been high on our list of potential hazards that could befall the university. So back in 2014, when I first got here, we had our first ever pandemic exercise where we simulated what it would be like to have a measles outbreak in your dorm, and then the subsequent inoculations of the people, vaccinations, and what setting up those points of distribution for our students would look like. There was in the mid 2000s, there was a big anti-vax movement, not the COVID anti-vax movement, but just routine vaccinations like chickenpox and the measles and mumps, rubella. And then what we realized was we have 12,300 students living in close proximity to each other. If one person gets it, it could potentially spread very quickly. So what do we do? How do we tackle a pandemic like that? So as I mentioned, we started out in 2014. We did another exercise in 2016. We looked at West Nile virus. We looked at Zika virus. So anytime there were big viruses in the news, we were trying to get ahead of it and do exercises for it. It's interesting that COVID really started to happen in March of 2020 when it came to the shores of the United States, right? But 2019, September of 2019 was the last time we had done a pandemic exercise. So it was fresh in everybody's mind. Everybody knew what they needed to do as COVID came into play in the United States. And we started meeting about the third week in January of 2020 because we started to see the counter. Everybody watched that counter, John Hopkins talking about how many people were infected worldwide, and China was on there, and China was saying that they had 600,000 cases, and quite frankly, we didn't believe that, right? We said if they're saying they had 600,000 cases, it was probably 10 times that amount. So we had a plan for what happens if it comes to North America. What happens if it comes to our FEMA region in the Southeast United States? What happens when it comes to the state? And then we had all these benchmarks laid out. This is what our posture needs to be at these various steps. What happens when it gets to our county, our city, and then, ground zero, what happens when we have our first case on campus? What does that look like? And we prepared every step of the way. And I think consequently we were well prepared for this. I think a lot of people were taken by surprise, but we knew this was happening. We had been beating the drum for a lot of years about remote classes and business impact analysis. We're doing a business impact analysis and what our COOP plans were for if we can't be in our classrooms and our labs and things. So we were really, really fortunate that our administration and our faculty members and our staff took it so serious as we were practicing for all those years, so that when it finally did happen, we were ready to go.
And Joe, one of the things that UCF has is a College of Medicine, College of Nursing. How much of a role did those entities play in the day-to-day practicality of you doing the daily briefs and the preparation and response for all the students at UCF?
Yeah, so in emergency management, we have a group called the Executive Policy Group, and they're your senior leadership of whatever your municipality or your corporation. At UCF, we have an executive policy group, but we call it the ESERT team, and that's the Emerging Issues Crisis Response Team. And it's the core team is about 12 people, and they're all vice president level folks. And then when we have specific incidents, say like a hurricane or a pandemic, the group is scalable, and you can bring in more people that have subject matter expertise. So we had a core of 29 people during COVID that we brought in for those eCert calls. And we started having eCert calls twice a day, mid to late morning, and then another one around 5:30 every evening. And we were talking about, the protective measures that the university was taking, things that we could do to kind of lean forward and make sure we were ready for when this came to us. And those calls started in early February. So we had the core emergency management team from the emergency operations center start meeting in January, and then a couple weeks later, we brought our senior leadership into it, and then that's when they started to kind of branch it out. So we did have folks from our medical school, and as you mentioned, nursing, marketing, helping us get our signage up, and sidewalk decals, and we started talking about getting supplies, the face coverings and the hand sanitizer stations. And, being in Central Florida, we ran into a very, very unique challenge. We were now competing with resources with the likes of Disney World and Universal Studios and these theme parks, because, we're a vacation destination. And of course, they want to keep the lights on and they want to keep open. So, trying to get those paper supplies, gloves and sanitizer and stuff, we had some stiff competition in the area. So, just figuring out what we needed so that we could order that stuff early, so that we could have it in place. That was a real challenge, but we had a real good cohesive group, and we got through it. And I think we did really, really well. In fact, we assigned our medical doctor that oversees our student health services, Dr. Michael Dyken, as the incident commander. And, he had never done anything like this before. And we said, listen, you're the subject matter expert. You're the medical doctor. I'll provide you any support I need to from the Emergency Operations Center. But ultimately, people are going to want to hear your expertise. You're going to be the one that makes them feel safe and assured. And so, he led the charge on that. And he wanted to become a subject matter expert. I mean, he was on webinars all throughout COVID, helping other institutions of higher education, prepare and telling them the things that we were doing. And we were doing all sorts of stuff here, UV scrubbers in our air conditioned returns, controls for our elevators that were operated by feet, 3D printing little mechanisms that you can use to open door handles so you didn't have to touch the doors. We had branded masks. We had two styles of masks. We had one with our Stacked logo and one with our Pegasus logo. And everybody, because they were wearing a mask every day, wanted both kinds of logos. So we put them out there and we let them get both types of logos. So and I have to say the alumni community reached out to us and said, what can we do to help? So one of our former student body vice presidents, he owns a company that produces baseball caps for Nike and socks and lids and Mitchell and Ness. And he has a factory that does all this for him in Vietnam. And he reached out to me. He said, what's your biggest problem right now? I said, we're just having a hard time getting masks, disposable masks, and then, these cloth masks that we want people to wear. And he said, Joe, I got you covered. He said, you just tell me what you need and what you want them to look like. And we went through this whole process, and he expedited the shipping, and we got KN95s and hand sanitizer and stuff all through, a former member of our student government who just wanted to give back to, he said, UCF was so good to me. This is where I pay it forward. This is where I give it back. And he did everything for us at cost. And, just a really good group of alumni, really cohesive group. And, COVID was a really dark time for our planet, right? But I think, all things considered, we did really well. I know I got a little rabbit trail, but hopefully that answered your question.
Those are some really cool stories as a result of, as you said, a bad incident. So Joe, going back really quick to the Thyro, right? So pandemic response is something that you've had a long time on that and you were planning for, and all those different scenarios. What else is at the top of that list that that worries the UCF community that you help plan for? What risks are the greatest? Oh, if you can say.
Yeah, no problem. A lot of this is available, on our website. We didn't give our numeric values, but we did, our planning assumptions for our plans, our comprehensive emergency management plan. And always at the top of the list was the weather-related event, right? The hurricane being in Central Florida. My first, from 2005 until I came here in 2014. We didn't really have anything. We had three storms in 2004, and then for a good 10-year span, a good decade, there was nothing coming to Central Florida. We got very, very fortunate. And then I came here to emergency management, and then we had Hurricane Irma and we had Hurricane Matthew. And those were the two real storms while I was an emergency management coordinator and later emergency manager of emergency management here. So that was, 2014 through 2018. Well, 2019, became director. And since then, we've had to close the university 7 times for hurricanes in the last 5 years. So my predecessor was here from 2008 to 2019, 11 years, and he only had to close the university twice for hurricanes. I've been in the seat since 2019, and now we've closed already 7 times since 2019. So, we all know, climate change is happening, right? Like the water temperatures are getting warmer in the Gulf and in the Atlantic, and it's creating a perfect environment for these superstorms. I saw an interesting statistic from the National Hurricane Center that our last 6, and I guess it's 7 now, our last 7 major hurricanes were all tropical storms 48 hours before becoming a major storm. That's how fast they're intensifying and turning into Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5. So, Thyra actually has the hurricane very, very high on the list. Active threat. So the assailant on campus, we used to call it active shooter. And then probably 2016, we saw Ohio State had an incident where someone started running over people with their car, and then they got out and they started chasing them around with a knife. So we stopped calling it active shooter, and we started calling it active assailant. Now the verbiage is more consistent with active threat. So we talk about people wanting to do nefarious acts to inflict bodily harm on people, whether it's through a gun, it's a knife, it's an explosive device, whatever. A student that had failed out, and back then UCF really didn't have a mechanism for evicting a student from university-owned housing after they had failed out. So the student had a real axe to grind with the university, or felt like he did. And so, he came up with this whole plan of how he was going to be an active shooter, and he was going to inflict this on the university. And he had a whiteboard in his dorm room, and he wrote out what his plan was going to be, and he created improvised explosive devices in his dorm room. He ordered a high power rifle with an extended magazine with a lot of rounds in it. And he decided that he was going to pull the fire alarm when everybody ran out of their dorms. He was going to attack them through his window. And so he started out his plan. He pulled the fire alarm, and when he did, one of his roommates came out and basically was going to ask, "Hey, do you think we should evacuate because of this fire alarm?" And he saw his this roommate standing there with a long rifle, and he panicked. He went and barricaded himself in the bathroom and called 911. And the police were very fortunate nearby. UCF is about a 1,400-acre campus. We have 87 sworn officers, I think we're at currently, and the response time is about 2 minutes. So under 2 minutes. And so anyway, law enforcement head over there, and as they were arriving, they heard a single gunshot. And when they entered the room, he had taken his own life without ever having a chance to, inflict what would be the darkest day in, potentially in higher education. Was averted. But those incidents, they're real, and we have to prepare for them, right? We hope that day never comes, but we're also not going to put our head in the sand and say that it can't happen to us, right? We were so close, and we were really fortunate that it didn't happen here, but it has happened at other places. It happened this week someplace, right? So anyway, active assailant. So I talked about pandemic. That's a big one for us. And cyber has really been on our radar a lot. We're starting to see the country as a whole, right? We had a certain posture after September 11th, where emergency management, homeland security experts, we planned for terrorism. That was a big thing that we we planned for. And now, we're looking more at nefarious actors, both domestic and abroad, that are looking to impact us by, we're a R1 research institution, right? So stealing maybe trade secrets, or things or projects that we're working on here. We're looking at cyber events that are impacting, elections and things like that. There's a lot of vulnerabilities to be had, and people are certainly trying to exploit them. So we're always doing things here at UCF where we're working with the cybersecurity office to make sure that, we're ready to go. We know the resources that are available to UCF in the event of a cyber attack, the phone numbers that we need to call, and how we activate the room behind me, how we activate this emergency operations center, how we get the people out here that are the right decision makers for the university to address a cyber related issue. So, those are just, a sampling of some of the things we have. We have structure fire, we have wildfire considerations, we have a lot of wooded areas on our campus. And UCF, we talk a lot in terms of main campus, which is our University Park campus in East Orlando. But we do have a medical school campus out by our airport. We do have a hospitality management school that's out by the convention center and Universal Studios. We have a downtown campus, an urban campus right at the heart of downtown Orlando. So we're making planning assumptions not just for our main campus, but for them too. And then we have our Connect campuses. We have 9 campuses that are situated on the sites of host campuses. So we're in partnership with, Valencia State College or Seminole State College or Lake Sumter State College. And then we have certain academic programs that are available at those 9 those 9 regional campuses. So, we have a big operation here, and it spreads all across Central Florida. And we just do our best. We're always trying to check those boxes and make sure that our community is safe, our faculty, staff, and students.
Yeah, Joe, it's really interesting when you talk about all of the things you just mentioned, and there's many more. People tend to forget how much a university is like a small city. With all the different roles, responsibilities, functions, interagency support, coordination. So you have plans and scenarios that are really important. And then how do those plans account for what your people do and the coordination with those outside agencies?
Yeah, that's a great question. UCF's really big. It's funny, you tell the story about how you really didn't know who we were, but at one point we were the largest university in the country, and now we're somewhere in the top 5. We're the largest university in the state of Florida. We have 12,280 people living on this campus at any given time. If you want to compare us against a municipality, we're the 33rd. We were a municipality, we would be the 33rd largest city in the state of Florida. We would be slightly larger than the city of Daytona Beach when you factor in our student population of a little over 69,000, 13,000 employees, and then 9,000 or 8 to 9,000 graduate students. So we're a very large institution, and so having relationships with our surrounding partners, right? Well, I guess I should talk internally first. So, I sit here in the Emergency Operations Center, and the Emergency Operations Center, is where all the decisions are made during any sort of incident or event that could happen here on campus. And so we have these seats behind us staffed as emergency support functions. So those are operational decision makers for the university that have some sort of subject matter expertise that have been really vetted by senior leadership for those departments to come here and make decisions on their behalf. So each of these seats is staffed with a primary person, a secondary person, and a tertiary person. Well, why do we do that? Because inevitably, if we have an incident occur on campus, the primary is going to be on a cruise in the Caribbean and they won't be able to be here. So we needed to call on that secondary person. And if we go into a prolonged operational period, say more than 12 hours, we're going to want those people to get rest, right? We want them on their A game during this emergency. So then you have your secondary or your tertiary person that fulfills that prolonged operational period, and they've been essentially deputized to take the reins and make those decisions. So we have it set up as a marketplace. So people that are most likely to make decisions together are seated together. So, behind me we have our planning table, right? Those are all the people that work with communications and enterprise risk and insurance, and our planning section chief, to make sure we're working the plans that we have in place, the plans that are in our CEMP, and the plans that we wrote because of our THIRA. Now those people are making sure that we work our plans and that we're keeping all of our documentation and that we're doing what we need to do from a planning aspect. Then, as I affectionately refer to them, we have the bean counter table, right? We have the finance table, and those are the people that are going to help us get resources. They're going to help us connect those dots with um, um, resources that are available on campus. They work with our logistics section, where we have our housing folks and our health and medical folks and some of our IT segments, critical infrastructure, to make sure that we have all the resources we need to get us back to as close to normal or the new normal as quickly as possible. And then we have the operations table, right? They're the boots on the ground. Those are the people that are, hazmat folks. They're our fire rescue folks. They're law enforcement. They're people that are out there, public works, getting our resources back online, making sure that the wrenches are being turned and the things are happening. So those are the people that are all behind me. And when the actual event occurs, we do have an EOC manager that manages those people and just make sure that we have a battle rhythm in place and that we're reporting out our situation reports, talking about what everybody's working on. We're providing that data to our executive policy group so they know the things that are being worked on, and then they can weigh in on things that require their assistance so that they can leverage their relationships with other state universities or relationships within the community to help us recover. So then that's our internal group of people, and then we have our external group of people. So we fall within Orange County. So we would go to, well, we fall within Orange County, collectively. All of our campuses fall within Orange County. We do have two of our regional campuses that fall within the city of Orlando. So we not only do we have a great relationship with Orange County Emergency Management, we have a spectacular relationship with the city of Orlando Emergency Management. And we get together with them about once a month and, talk about things that are happening at UCF. We have calls for the emergency management teams for our groups. And while I have the emergency support functions that are for UCF behind me, they have a seat for UCF in each of their emergency operations centers where we're an emergency support function for them. So we have a liaison officer that goes to Orange County Emergency Management, has a seat in there, and we tell them, what impacts UCF's having and what resources we need from the county to help us. And then the county lends their support to us. And if it gets too big for the county, now we go to state, right? We go to Florida Division of Emergency Management. We have a real close relationship with the director of emergency management here in the state of Florida. His name is Kevin Guthrie. And, he's treated the state university system very well. There's 12 state universities, one of which we are. And he allows us to go direct to the state should we need to. And get resources from them. So if it's not something that's necessarily impacting Orange County or the city of Orlando, we can go directly to the state, and the state treats the state university system kind of like a county in some ways, or maybe a tribal area like an Indian tribe. So we've built those relationships. The thing I always like to say, and maybe it's a little cliche thing that we say in the industry, is you should be making friends and handing out business cards in the blue sky days. You don't want to be working your Rolodex when the sky is falling, right? Chicken Little's running around saying the sky is falling. You do not want to be working your Rolodex then, trying to make relationships and introducing yourself to the emergency manager of the city of Orlando or Orange County or any of our local municipalities. We're really close with Seminole County and Osceola, and we train and exercise with them. We train and exercise with the airport, other state universities. FAMU is a great partner. They have a law school in Orlando, And they're geographically in Tallahassee, so we have a relationship with FAMU that we'll go over to the FAMU Law School, which is in Orlando, and we'll start to help manage their emergency while help is on the way from their main campus in Tallahassee, because we've built those relationships in advance of
Wow.
an incident.
So that's a great example of fantastic mutual aid at work, Joe. So we've talked a little bit about planning, training, exercises, the coordination of people during an emergency. What about your availability of resources and technology? What's that look like?
So, one of the things that we've really been trying to get a hold of is what our resources are available. What resources do we have available on campus, right? Um, Brock Long, a former FEMA administrator, his mindset, and I really adopted this mindset, and I think that's this mindset everybody should have. Everybody should be as self-sufficient as they possibly can on the front end at your own agency or your own organization, right? And know what your resources you have available there, so that you can start the response and recovery period much sooner than having to put a request into the city or the county. And then you work up the ladder from there. So knowing what you have available to you, it's really important for me to know the skills and abilities that are available from the people that are in the room. I mean, these are subject matter experts that the university has hired so that they can make decisions. But knowing public works, what kind of water pumps they have, what kind of trucks they have, what kind of generators that they have, and how long will the systems that we have in place prolong us. What's our window, right? Can we go 12 hours, 14 hours, 36 hours without power before now it becomes a real challenge for our generators, where we need to reach out to the city or to the county or to the state. So knowing the resources are available. If we have a wildfire on campus, do we have a brush truck, right? So, Orange County Fire Rescue, they don't come off the pavement. So if we have a wildfire on campus, because we're 1,420 acres, a lot of which is wooded, they'll fight the fire from the pavement, right? But they're not going to go back in the brush and start running a bulldozer and stuff like that. But we do have those resources here. We have a brush truck here. And why do we do that? Because we know that we're the first line of defense on campus, the people that work for landscape and natural resources here, until the Division of Forestry gets here, and they're farther out on the east side of the county, almost to the Brevard County line. So we know that we have to be self-sufficient for that hour, right, to make sure the fire's not spreading and getting to our facilities and stuff. So knowing the resources that are available to you, knowing the people that you have on speed dial, the things that are in your warehouse as it relates to to masks and blankets to stomp out fires, right? Solar has become a big thing. We have solar charging arrays all over campus. A solar fire can get out of hand pretty quickly. A electric car fire takes 40,000 gallons of water to put out, and then it can constantly be reigniting, right? These lithium-ion batteries, lithium cobalt batteries. So we have blankets that are available to us to put on these cars, to put on these solar panels, to choke them out of oxygen so that we have it. But just making sure that these items are in your plans and knowing the resources that are available to you are incredibly important. We've built WebEOC boards. WebEOC is the tool that we use to manage our emergency operations center. We've built boards that says what these pieces of equipment are and where they're housed across the campus. I'll give you a great example of one. When COVID happened, and you remember when PPE was so hard to get, face shields for doctors and the little clips that made it so that your mask didn't pull on your face all day and leave you permanent lines in your head. We started 3D printing stuff like that for our local hospitals, for Advent Health and for Orlando Health System. They needed this stuff, and they just couldn't get it. The face shields. We figured out that there were 39 3D printers across campus that we could leverage to use to print PPE and then send it over to our local local hospitals so they could treat these patients with COVID. That was us being a good partner, right? We were doing whatever we could. And we had these 3D printers working 24 hours a day printing these pieces out. And getting a list from across campus. Well, now we have that list and we know where those 3D printers are. Now, anytime anybody buys a 3D printer, procurement sends me a notification and lets me know, hey, this department on campus just bought 3D printers. Add it to your inventory list so that, God forbid we get that COVID type thing again, and we need to print, PPE. We know where to get those resources at. And as COVID marched on, and we needed, hand sanitizer started to dwindle and things started to dwindle. The hospitals remembered that we helped them, and then they helped us. They said, "Hey, come on by. We can give you 50,000 KN95 masks for your people that are still working on campus." And we went over their central receiving, and we got stuff. So we build those relationships at the hospital, at the fire department, at corrections, at you name it in Central Florida. We built those relationships, and consequently have a lot more resources available to us because of that. And everybody wants to partner with us.
I think that's really remarkable with all the technology you have and your ability to insource for needs that you might not, or you'll be competing with for Disney and other agencies in Central Florida. So that's really remarkable. I had no idea that you have that capability, and you could take care of a lot of your own needs and the needs of others just by looking inward and leveraging the great resource that UCF is.
And taking care of your, I was just going to say, and taking care of your faculty and staff. When we have a hurricane here, a lot of times they're without power and water for a prolonged period of time. We determined where showers were on campus. We determined where all the ice machines were on campus, right? So they can come and they could load up coolers with ice and take it back to their house so they could have ice and they could have water while they're without power and stuff. And having just to have a hot shower, the things you take for granted, right? They're out of power 4, 5, 7 days, being able to come to the rec and wellness center or, the education complex.
Yeah, no doubt. So Joe, what I'd like to do now is bring back Sean. Sean's our producer for this episode. And Sean, you have some questions from the audience you'd like to ask Joe?
Yeah. So how are drones being used to enhance security on campus and especially during large events? And that's open to both of you.
Well, I can talk about, what we're doing here to make sure that, the drone process is a manageable process. So, the FAA is the end all be all when it comes to drones, right? I, jokingly say all the time, we're not the drone police. We just want to make sure that everybody's flying in a safe manner. So naturally, the FAA controls the airspace above UCF. We, UCF, didn't have the good fortune of being built by a major airport. And what I mean by the good fortune is there's a lot less that you can do when your organization's in close proximity to, federal airspace like that, like an airport. So consequently, we have a lot of hobbyists that want to fly their drones here. And we're not trying to, be the Grinch that doesn't want anybody to fly their drones. We know UCF's a beautiful campus and we're very fortunate, right? And they want to fly their drones here. We just want to make sure that it's an orderly process. So what we do ask is that we have a drone policy in place that people would reach out to the Office of Emergency Management, and they would use a web EOC form, forward-facing form on the internet, to go ahead and fill out a flight pattern, tell us where you want to fly, the purpose of your flight, and provide some ancillary details. So if you're flying for official university business, our insurance requirements are that you have an FAA Part 107 pilot's license. Simple as that. If you're not, and you're not a licensed pilot and you're flying for official university business, our general liability insurance won't cover you. There's also the aspect of what kind of drone are you flying. Statutorily, the state of Florida, through Division of Managerial Services, has a list of approved drones or, drones that aren't built in countries of concern. You can't fly a drone that was built in North Korea. You can't fly a drone that's built in China. You can't fly a drone that's built in Iran. So there are, drones of concern. So we ask you which drone you're flying to make sure that you're flying, one of these drones for official university business that are on the state's approved list and that they would ultimately be covered should an incident occur, right? We have every year about 750 homemade drones that are built for um, engineering projects, capstone projects, and things. We just want to know where they're being flown at. So it's not a surprise to us when someone tells us we had a drone crash and it damaged building X, Y, and Z. I'll tell you a funny one that happened years ago, and actually it was when Joe and I worked together. Someone crashed their drone on top of our water tower. Now at UCF, the water tower is one of the more iconic, well, it's one of the icons of campus, right? It's a big water tower, beige water tower that says UCF on the side of it. And, people want to fly by it and get their footage for it. Um, so someone shows up at the door of the Emergency Operations Center and they say to us, can we borrow your drone? And we said, well, we don't really lend our drone out. And they said, oh. And I said, why? And they said, well, we just crashed our drone on top of the water tower and we were going to see if we could do a rescue mission with your drone. Well, first off, if you just crash your drone, I'm probably not going to lend you my drone. I'm going to go there first. And then, the second part of it is we had no idea that they were flying there. Now they did no damage to the water tower, right? But what if they did, crash into a building that had sensitive research equipment on the top of it? Because we do have buildings like that, or they, crash into a solar array and created a broader fire or something like that. So we like to know, where these drone flights are occurring. So a couple of years ago, our local sheriff's office applied for a UASI, the telemetry that tells you where the drones are across the county on the east side. So they said, we're going to put one downtown campus, we're going to put one by the airport, one on the west side, and we need a spot on the east side. So we said, sure, great. So we put a drone detection system array on our stadium and our football stadium, which really helps us out because if you don't know, Division I football programs have a temporary flight restriction put in place that begins an hour pre-game, pre-kickoff, to the clock counting down to 0, 1 hour post-game. You are not allowed to fly a drone during that time because it's a temporary flight restriction. You would actually have to apply to get a waiver to fly during that time. So what does that tell us? Game day comes, we have people flying over the stadium. Our drone detection system tells us where the drone is and where the operator is operating the drone from. We radio to law enforcement and then we tell them, hey, it appears that the drone operator is over by the soccer field. They go and they make contact with them. They say, hey, it's a temporary flight restriction because of Division I football game. You can't be flying. And they ask them to take it down. Now, most of these hobbyist drones don't know that they're potentially on the cusp for a potential up to $100,000 fine for doing this. So immediately they're very compliant, right? They don't know that the police officer is not giving them the fine. They don't know that it comes from the FAA, but they're always very, very compliant. So the drone detection, for that type of thing has really been a godsend. Sometimes we have, protests on campus that we're concerned with could potentially turn into civil unrest, and people put drones up because they want to keep an eye on things. And so just having a finger on the pulse of the drone operation here is really really important to us. It's the future, right? We have a drone here that we use for law enforcement matters. It's got a FLIR camera on it, got a high megapixel camera. We can put it up for prolonged periods of time. We can monitor crowd control. If there's a structure fire, we can fly it overhead to see where law enforcement, fire rescue crews are, what the evacuation looks like. So we're leveraging them here, and we certainly see the value in them.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add to that. That's a great description of how they're used in higher ed and how you're protecting the campus from the use of hobbyists and maybe bad actors trying to use them and detecting them before something bad can happen. But as Joe alluded, using them as an asset for security, for events, for getting eyes on a situation where you might not have infrastructure to put cameras, or it might be an area that wouldn't need cameras normally, but an incident is happening there. So, Serverly offers a lot of solutions involving drones for security. And what we're seeing a lot of lately is tethered drones because they're easy to deploy. You can put them in the back of your car, or some are mounted to the back of trucks, depending on the size of the drone. But if you can operate an elevator and hit the up down button, you can operate one of those drones, and they don't require the FAA licensing because they're tethered. So it's an interesting topic, which we'll probably spend a whole episode on, drones and security. And if so, Joe, we'll certainly have you back and talk more about your program. And I think that'll help others understand the good, the bad, the ugly about drones.
Yeah, people have gotten really creative with these tethered drones. I saw a demo of one not that long ago that has a roll top that you remotely can deploy the drone, from your smartphone, and it's in the back of a pickup truck with a roll top, and it goes up. Well, the pickup that they use is an electric pickup truck, so they're powering it off the pickup truck's battery cell, and it can go up for indefinite periods of time, and much higher sustained winds than your traditional, unmanned drone that's not tethered, right? And then you have that data feed coming down to it, and sharing it. Emergency operations center, we share our drone footage right here in the emergency operations center. And then we can store it here on our servers, and we have access to it for future events and future planning purposes and stuff. So yeah, I mean, we could talk for 3 hours about the use of drones in the higher ed space, or in any space for that matter. But yeah, it really is the future.
Yeah, I mean, we scratched a surface on so many topics of conversation that we'll definitely have to have you back, Joe, and do deeper dives on some of these for sure. I want to thank you, Joe, for coming on our episode today on the Security Connection podcast. You provided a lot of great information. I know firsthand that you welcome people into your emergency operations center for tours or sharing ideas. You're very much a good partner to the industry. So, folks, if you're interested in doing that, and Joe's willing, we'll put his contact information in the show notes. So, Joe, thank you for being on the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure.
I also want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of the Security Connection podcast. Please consider subscribing to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Please leave a comment too, as how you like the episode, what questions you might have, suggestions for future episode, or potential guests we could have on this as well. Also, check out serverly.com. And until next time, stay secure and stay informed. Thank you.